I was here as part of a conference to talk about urban design, what the context and role is in city making, but also we did this as a partnership to work with city staff on how it works here. Our firm specializes in doing this all across North America. This is the first Canadian city that we'd ever done this analysis, so it was kind of fun for us to do that. So with it was trying to find a way to measure the city, and it's looking at measurements and how we look at how cities operate. What's your role in this as citizens in the city? What does it mean to you? So the city is essentially a finite boundary of land, and more so for you all. You have a growth boundary. You have only so much land to use, and it's got to function in a very economic term, or a way that the costs are managed by its revenue. What does it mean here? How does it operate in Canada and in Guelph? So the first thing that was obvious to us was how complex your tax code is, which is good and bad. It's good because it gives you more dials. This is the way that we look at your tax code, and then this is North Carolina. Like everybody in my city is taxed the same rate, straight across the board. It's really kind of crude. It's a blunt instrument. It gives us a lot less flexibility. So for the complexity that you have in your system, it actually gives you more tools to work with. Does that all make sense? You're at about 122,000 people. Your metropolitan area is 140,000, so a lot more people are in your city than out at the edges. We're the direct opposite. We've got 83,000 people in our city, but once you add in all the peripheral towns that feed off us, we're at 417,000 people. Our downtown's about 145 hectares. Yours is half the size, yet you have double the value that we've got. So you have a very potent physical downtown that's producing a lot of revenue. So you see a lot of tax production out here in purples and reds, some down here, and then here's downtown in here coming in green. But this isn't a fair way to look at your city. This is, again, the miles per tank. It doesn't account for the land. This is just looking at the total tax bill. When we go to the taxes per acre, or the value per acre, this is how it looks. So you start to see downtown pop up in purple at over $60 million an acre or hectare in value. And you start to see how this stuff disappears. Big employment sector out there, but it takes a lot of space to make that happen. Does that make sense? It's part of your asset. So this is your three-dimensional model of your community. We're sitting like right about there. You can see the river coming through here. And this is which highway was this again? Yeah. And again, the 3D, it peaks out right about here. It kind of bleeds off the map because of the light in the room. You can see you spike up right about here and then drop down. So your purples are right about there. So again, this is just your downtown. You can see the spikes. This is the, let's see, this is the way your taxes look in your downtown. So you're seeing a lot of taxes coming out of this main intersection right here. Here's your train tracks coming through right about there, and here's your river. Your downtown takes up about 1% of your entire city, yet it's producing 4% of your property tax revenue. It's a 1-to-4 ratio. It's a pretty good productivity. It's something that we see as a norm in good, healthy downtowns, is that potency. But it's showing you where you're getting a big bang for the buck. 23% of your downtown is non-taxable. So even though this is the garden that produces the most revenue on a potency level, you do have non-taxable land in your city buildings and public buildings like that. This is actually pretty good. In my town, it's about 44% tax exempt, which is not good. We've got our city and county have a bunch of surface parking lots all over the place, which is not wise. So just to kind of recap some specific buildings we pulled out. The Tim Hortons Distribution Center is about $800,000 a hectare. This TRS on Woodlawn is about $2 million per hectare. When you get into the Walmart and the Target, this is kind of interesting, just the difference in value per hectare. We're at $300,000 per hectare for the Walmart, about $3 million, 10 times the value for the Target per hectare. The Willow Mall is about $2.4 million. University Retail is about $3 million. The Delta Hotel is about $3 million. Stone Road Mall is really potent, let's say about $9 million a hectare. It's actually one of the most high-value malls that we have in our entire sample of our collection. When you get in the downtown, the numbers really jump up. This is a converted factory to apartments at $12 million. So if that mall was potent at $8 million, $9 million, This is more potent than the mall. This is at 17 million per hectare, just down the street over here, 140 Woolrich. You get into the core of the downtown, this is at 21 million. And this is actually your most productive per hectare building. We got a big laugh out of this as well. When we showed this, everybody's like, oh my God. I mean, it's kind of it could use some attention, this building. We'll say that. But there's a lesson there. You know, even in the state that it's in, and it really could use some polishing, it's doing all right. And again, it's that value of density. And it's also a mix of uses. It's got office, it's got commercial, it's got underground parking. And so it's producing a lot of revenue. It's an efficient building. Office buildings, what happens when you have a one-story office building? You've gone from a $5 million per hectare value down to about a 3.5, just by losing those upper stories and losing that efficiency. You see what happens when you have a mix of uses, an underground deck. Now we're at about 7 million per hectare for that. The Petrie-Kelly buildings, this one here is about 64 million per hectare. And then this one, in the state that it's in, is still about 25 million per hectare. If we were just able to get those active and get that rehabbed, you can drive that value up. And what's crazy is this building's been around since 1882. There's a postcard of it with literally horses and buggies in a street trolley. This is a building that's been in your community's portfolio for 150 years. Is the Stone Road Mall going to be here 150 years from now? Is a Target going to be here 150 years from now? These are legacy properties inside your community that are producing potent wealth. A typical box office building is about 48,000 per hectare of tax production. Here's the Target at 73,000 per hectare. The average of downtown is producing about 85,000 per hectare of taxes. When you get into individual buildings in the downtown, the green stuff is mixed use, multi-story. Red is commercial, blue is residential. The 140 Woolrich down by the river is about $460,000 per hectare in taxes. Again, comparing that to the Target at 74,000, or the Petrie building, the Petrie-Kelly building is about $660,000 per hectare. Here's the Park Mall, which is the big one. Now, even though that building is what it is, I think the lesson here is less that building, but more the Gummer building. The Gummer building produces about $1 million per hectare in city property taxes. 0.4 hectares of this little guy in the state that it's in would equal the entire 4-hectare Target. The Gummer building, which is here, 3.1 hectares of that would equal the entire 14-hectare mall. This is a side view of Syracuse, and this is a side view of you. One of the things that's interesting about your model is look at how thick your baseline is compared to here or here. So this is 120,000 people. This city here is 140,000 people. Syracuse has got 20,000 people more in it, but they've got a lot less built wealth in the way that they've developed versus what you've done. You've also got a higher peak than what Syracuse said. Let me just do this. We turned them into a heart monitor so you could see your pulses. So you can see how well you're doing in your baseline, and it's because of past policy decisions. You all have adopted higher density standards than what's typical in America. So you see a lot thicker value production than what these cities do. Incidentally, these cities are having budget issues because they're not having that revenue, but they've got all of that infrastructure to spread out. So it's a great lesson that they should learn on the other side of the border there. The challenge that I left the audience, and just going to go through in closing, is we can measure things. We measure our potato chips, right? We know the fat content, sodium content. We're making those daily decisions when we eat, and we have data on how to do that. Can we do the same thing for land uses? Can we have the revenue and the costs in the decisions and talk about how we build our portfolio that way? That Guelph is a $17 billion corporation. You all are shareholders in a $17 billion. You're worth more than the hockey teams or your 13.5 Maple Leafs, if you want to put it that way, right? Do you think of yourselves that way, that you can go out and cut off a piece of the community and buy the Leafs? You know? More importantly, do you think the owner of the Leafs knows what Phil Kessel's towel bill is? Of course. So why aren't you having that conversation about what are the costs and revenues for having that productivity? And that's the challenge to your community going forward. And I just want to challenge you all to do the math and see your city a different way. So thank you.